It's got a ring to it.
I get knocked down, but I get up again. Cause they haven't gonna keep me down. I get knocked down, but I get up again. Cause they haven't gonna keep me down.
First of all, when I was asked to speak about 35 years in marketing, I was very upset. Not because I was asked to talk about all the mistakes I'd made and maybe things that could be learned from those mistakes, but because they said it was 35 years. I was very sensitive about that, but I checked and it was 35 years. And it does go to show, though, that time flies when you're having fun. Marketing is the school of hard knocks. You've got to take the blame often, but not the praise. I would always have a chuckle going to the Exco meetings at MultiChoice. I was only there for 20 years, by the way, Joel. At MultiChoice, and if the guys knew that our subscriber growth was good because I was in charge of sales as well, they would say, "Fuli, how are sales?" And if they knew they weren't so good, they would say, "Fuli, how are your sales?" So you need to have a thick skin, because everyone, as you know, as marketers and salespeople, everyone's a marketer and they can market better than you. You can cry with frustration, and I have. Sometimes you just know you're doing everything all right, but nothing's happening, and those are the times. But as long as you've got the passion to cry with frustration, you're going to be all right. When you make mistakes in marketing, you make them in public. And here's just one of them. I was very proud of one of my first big super sport layouts, and we had Ernie Els as one of the centerpieces of this layout. This was a long time ago when we still had trannies. Everything was signed off by me, by the agency. I was really excited about this amazing piece, work of art from Supersport, until I opened the Sunday Times the next morning, and Ernie was playing golf left-handed. Unfortunately, the tranny had been turned around. I hadn't seen it, and I'd gladly signed off the ad. So when you make mistakes, unfortunately, I had to go into the Wanderers Golf Club in the next few days, and I got into a bit of trouble for that. It's also the school of amazing highs. It's the one occupation where there is still place for the human touch. There is still place for taking chances. And it's still the place where you can get that wonderful feeling of excitement in your guts when you see something that's working. So that's really what's made it all worthwhile. So I thought what I would do is take you through some of the lessons learned, some of the mistakes made, and some suggestions for maybe fixing them, and with some suggestions, and see what you think. If you maybe pull out one or two things today, it's going to be great. This is one of my my kind of big ones. I was lucky to start at J&J, and at Johnson & Johnson we were seen, the brand manager was seen as the king of the brand, the manager of that brand, the general manager of that brand. And what I tend to find these days is that when I speak to marketing managers, when I speak to brand managers, they seem to think that their only responsibility is advertising the brand. And in fact, sometimes they just pass that on to the ad agency anyhow. I think if you do that, what you're losing is the other 3 Ps. And luckily, I was involved in all of those from the start. So if you're going to be decent at marketing, don't think that all you need to do is advertise your brand. If your pricing's not right, trust me, it doesn't matter how good the advertising you do, the brand won't sell. I had a beautiful example of this earlier on, also at J&J. It was my responsibility to do the price increases for the brand, and we had a house brand, a cotton wool brand, that was in one of our big outlets, and I put the price increase through, and it went through, and with shock and horror the next day I discovered that I put the wrong price increase through. Instead of 5%, I'd given them a 2.5% increase. The cost to the company was going to be probably, in those days, it was small in relation to today, but it was going to be hundreds of thousands of rands. I went to my boss and told him what I'd done. And this is where it's so important to have bosses that trust you in this business. He said, Fuel, that wasn't very clever of you, but you better get on a plane and go and speak to these buyers. At those days, the old OK Bazaars. And I begged, pleaded, cajoled, and I got told very quietly to. Fortunately, my boss had trusted in me. I learned the lesson that when people trust in you, it really makes a difference. And I also learned that even in marketing, you've got to be really accurate. So pricing is so really important. When it comes to place, distribution, I spoke to someone the other day and said, but what's your distribution like? Their product wasn't moving so well. I said, well, I'm not quite sure. I said, what outlets are you in? What percentage of the trade are you in? And they didn't know. And that frightened me because it's so vital to get the right distribution for your brand. And it's also vital to do clever pieces of distribution. Is your brand in the right place in the store? I saw quite a clever one for firelighters the other day when they were in their right position, but they were also next to the meat section. So distribution, guys, as a marketing manager, brand manager, product manager, whatever you need to call it, it's vital that you get that right. The one which there's probably the most discussion is the product. Now, with the product, people often think they're little men in white coats who do all the product development for you, and they do it. They're the clever guys, and you as the marketing guy just wait to see what they do. I've seen companies that do product development, and there are lots of them. Just the one I noticed yesterday, which I've noticed for quite a long time, is Nestle. How brilliantly have they taken, for instance, their Chocky brands, the Bar Ones and the Peppermint Crisp, into ice creams? How have they taken Nescafe into all sorts of derivations? You have to be thinking, and it's not the job of the man in the little white coat. It's you take the responsibility because you need to be developing your brand. Here's a true story. We were sitting in a big brand meeting. It wasn't my particular brand. It was a brand called Johnson's Baby Powder. And there are two strategies which they had to get right. The one was, we've got 90% of the baby powder market. How are we going to make more people use this? So part of the strategy was get into the adult market, and that was all going pretty well. The other strategy was, how do we make people use more Johnson's Baby Powder? Now, the men in the white coats were also in the room. And some guy who was also a product manager like me said, you know what I find? In East London, it often gets quite muggy. And I find that it doesn't pour that well. And we had a kind of assistant deputy young lady who was just starting off in marketing. And she put her hand up quite gingerly and said, has anybody ever thought of making the holes bigger? The men in white coats kind of huffed and puffed and laughed at her. And luckily we had a fantastic MD. He said, why didn't any of you buggers think of this earlier? We did it, and usership went up very, very quickly. Okay. Research. We all love research. We use it, and I'll say all the good things about research. However, what I found in the younger days is that we often tend to use research as a crutch. Almost like a government department, when they're not quite sure what to do, they get a subcommittee. When you're doing, that's governments around the world, not ours. When you're not very good at marketing and maybe you're very insecure, you keep on researching everything. You start pre-researching every single ad you do because basically you're not sure. And that makes people around you also not sure. And what you're really doing is trying to cover your ass. What happens though is when that research goes out, you will get 10 different people saying 10 different things. And what happens is that you will get a very, very watered down ad.